Larry at Hagemeisters, got one of our customers, regular customers here with this truck. We've installed a starter on it. Now we want to show you some of the steps in checking it. This is a regular customer's truck. We put an alternator on this some time back, and he began to have starter issues. So we went ahead and changed the starter to one of our heavy-duty 6.9, 7.3 gear reduction starters that replace the Mitsubishi. So with this new starter installed, I think it's critical that you do a crank voltage test. And we do that by starting with the farthest battery, and then we move to the next battery, and then our last step is hooked onto the starter and check the crank voltage at the starter. So I've got the voltmeter hooked to this battery, and you can see it's about 12.6 volts right there on that scale. Now I'm going to crank the truck, and we're going to watch what it drops to. Okay, here's our starter installed, and as you can see, it's not that difficult, and this starter does give you enough room before it's hitting the cross member. Some starters don't do that, they're too close. So we did our crank voltage test. We started from the battery that's farthest from the starter, crank voltage there, and then we moved to the battery that's closest to the starter for crank voltage. And then the most critical, we moved our test leads right to the starter to find out what the crank voltage is there. We don't want more than a half a volt difference on that crank voltage, half a volt drop. So we got our starter installed in our Ford diesel. We did all the tests, batteries were good, crank voltage was good at the starter. Wanted to show you now, this is the old starter, the core that we took out, and here are the bolts, and this is our replacement starter. And I wanted to show you all the different models that this starter replaces. So in 1983, when the 6.9 Ford came out, it came with this Delco starter. Well, later on there was a TSB on this starter not working properly and grinding on the flywheel. You can see that in the TSB. And then later they updated it to this Mitsubishi starter. So as you can see, the mounting flange is the same on both of them. But yet on this one you got a 10-tooth drive, and this one you have a 13-tooth. It's because of this pilot offset right here that they do that allows for a different size of gear. Gives you a little more crank speed with that larger gear. So this is the early 6.9 and some early 7.3s that had these two starters. And our starter will bolt right in place of these. You can see this is how you measure. You got your mounting flange and you got your gears. Are all about the same. So this starter would bolt right in any two of these. This starter will also replace these three starters on the 7.3s, but it needs to have the spacer plate to do the job. So here's our spacer plate that comes with it to replace these. You've got a shoulder here, can only go in one way, and now this is your pilot into the bell housing. But when you do that and get that set, now it's the same on your gears. Flange is the same, gears are the same as we go across here. So that's critical. That's the way I recommend measuring it if you're still confused on whether you need the spacer plate or not. So our replacement starter that has the spacer plate comes with bolts, and the reason being is that the starter we took off that truck had these bolts on them. I've just cleaned them up. But you can see that the head's pretty big compared to our replacement flange bolt. And you need that smaller head on there to be able to get your wrench on, because it takes it too close to the aluminum. So that's why we include bolts, and you need a little more length to accommodate the spacer plate if you're going to do that. So customers often wonder how you can put a larger 13-tooth gear in place of a 10-tooth. It's because of this pilot offset. So it's right here, we'll move it farther away from the flywheel, and this here is not near as much. So that's how they're accomplishing that larger gear in that application. You look at the Delco here, it has a pilot that it's about the same on both sides. So that's how they're accomplishing that. Check the description below for more information about this starter. I'd like to mention that for some reason the 5 different starters I have setting here all are on those Ford diesels, and we just feel that this starter is the best to do the job correctly. Thanks for watching.